You may have read about or seen a video referencing the Danish practice of staying cozy called hygge, and perhaps this word conjures in your mind images of warm fireplaces, hot cocoa, woolen socks, sweaters, and rich sweets. Or perhaps you've heard of terms that refer to similar sentiments of coziness from other Nordic cultures, like the Norwegian kosleg, the Finnish lampoa, and the Swedish misa. While each of these can be practiced all year round, they are one weapon in an arsenal used by Nordic people to enjoy the coldest, most inhospitable months of the year, and part of a broader philosophy of happiness that those of us outside the Nordic countries can learn from. While seasonal affective disorder is a serious problem in other parts of the world with harsh winters, like North America, the Nordic countries are consistently ranked among the happiest in the world. So how do people from some of the coldest regions in the world achieve this? And how does this philosophy and approach to life manifest in Nordic art and storytelling? In this video, I will examine just that, through Nordic books, films, and other stories you should watch or read in order to stay happy, content, and cozy this winter.
The invisible mice hurried to make hot coffee.
Like many cultures around the world, Nordic culture has been shaped by the conditions of its environment. Preparing for and surviving long, harsh winters has been an integral aspect of Nordic culture for thousands of years, and therefore permeates not only the Nordic way of life, but also the Nordic storytelling tradition. For example, storytelling was a hugely important part of Norse life during the Viking Age, in part because it was a great indoor activity during the days when it was freezing outside. Vikings were quite active outdoors during the winter months, but would have required more shelter from the cold than cultures closer to the equator. This is where indoor activities like feasting, singing, poetry, and storytelling came into play. Court poets called skalds told stories through formal, structured poetry. However, Norse society also loved spoken stories in general.
The serpent bites, but now must I sing?
Many stories that made the rounds in halls or longhouses during the Viking Age were recorded centuries later in Iceland and called the sagas. There are legendary sagas that tell of gods and magic, like the saga of the Volsungs, and more realistic family histories or accounts of heroism, like the saga of Eric the Red. Whether through sagas or poetry, storytelling served not only to entertain, but also educate and reinforce Norse culture and values, like bravery. And these tales can still inspire us to brave the cold, dark world of winter, like a Viking. Many mythical creatures included in the sagas or Old Norse poems, like giants, trolls, and elves, may have evolved as representations of the untamed, unpredictable elements of nature. And some, like the frost giants, seem to be season-specific. A character, often a villain, representing the danger of winter, is a theme that continued in Nordic literature long after the sagas were recorded. This theme appears in some of the stories and fairy tales written by Hans Christian Andersen in the 19th century. Andersen's stories have been translated into countless languages and enjoyed by many cultures around the world, but in spite of their universal appeal, his stories infuse his uniquely Danish sensibilities, especially the stories set in winter. For example, in his story The Snow Queen, a young girl named Gerda goes on a quest to rescue her friend Kai from an evil sorceress who has poisoned his heart and brought him to her snow palace. A snow sorceress who lives in an ice palace? Why does that sound so familiar? Never mind. I guess I should just let it go, let it go. In this story, the Snow Queen represents the harsh, inhospitable aspects of winter, as well as the winter of the human heart, but reminds us that these can be overcome by love, as Kai is ultimately rescued by Gerda's love for him. As Mike Viking mentions in his little book of hygge, hygge is enhanced if there is an element of danger outside, like a storm for instance, but a danger that you are sheltered and safe from inside. Mike refers to this danger as uhygge, the scary opposite of hygge, which from a safe distance, such as within a story, can actually enhance the atmosphere of hygge. A scary or suspenseful story can foster an appreciation for the safety and comfort we currently feel by reminding us how safe we are from the danger in that story. This may explain the appeal of scary creatures like frost giants or characters like the Snow Queen, and perhaps why present-day Scandinavians seem to have an obsession with crime fiction, despite the low crime rate their countries enjoy. The Nordic countries, including Iceland and Finland, have produced many of the best crime novels of the last few decades. The most famous of these is the Millennium novel series by Swedish author Stig Larsson. These are great books to curl up with on cold winter nights, and will help you appreciate how cozy you are, considering the fact that you aren't actually a vigilante computer hacker tracking a serial killer in the cold Swedish countryside. Unless, of course, you are. Another great example of the Scandinavian crime novel phenomenon is the Harry Hula series by Norwegian author Yul Nesbø, and particularly the 7th entry in the series, The Snowman. The story follows Oslo detective Harry Hula, who investigates a series of murders that occur after the first snowfall of winter. The only clues Hula can find are snowmen left by the killer at each murder scene. In this story, the killer's identity is associated with the season of winter itself, like Andersen's Snow Queen. In both tales, the hero bravely challenges the dark and frightening aspects of winter as represented by the villain, and as they do so, so do we. However, this symbolism is definitely lost on the 2017 film adaptation of the book, which you might want to skip. There is more to the Nordic approach to winter than facing the villain that is winter like a hero in a fairy tale. The Nordic people are also well aware of the beauty of winter, as expressed by another Hans Christian Andersen story, The Snowman, which is about a serial killer who leaves a snowman— oh wait, that's Nesbø's Snowman. Andersen's Snowman is a story about a snowman who has a conversation with an old watchdog that is chained up near him. The snowman expresses his appreciation for the frosted trees, hills, and other beautiful imagery of the season, but soon becomes entranced by an even greater beauty, the beauty of a warm fireplace visible through a nearby window. After all, the beauty of winter is sometimes enhanced when it is viewed through a window near a warm fireplace. Sorry for the shocking spoilers, but in the end, the snowman melts, reminding us that the season itself is only temporary, and we must appreciate its beauty while we can. Winter can be very beautiful, but there are also many activities and ways to enjoy the season. This is a lesson learned by the character Moomintroll in the Finnish author Tove Jansson's children's book series, The Moomins. The series follows Moomintroll, who is a, Moomintroll. His parents, Moomin Papa and Moomin Mama, the Hemulans, who are a Moomin-like creature, and other odd residents of Moomin Valley, like the Grok. The Moomins typically hibernate through winter. However, in the 7th book of the series, Moominland Midwinter, Moomintroll wakes up in the dead of winter and must navigate his way through the strange new season while his parents sleep. Moomintroll is at first scared of the very real danger the season poses, which is embodied by the beautiful but ominous Lady of the Cold, a spirit who can freeze someone to death simply by looking at them. However, with the help of his friends Tutiki and the brash little Mai, the skeptical Moomintroll begins to realize that winter is not all that bad, especially when you are near a warm stove with some delicious jam in your belly. The fun activities of winter are embodied by a large Hemulan character, who is referred to as Mr. Brisk in the later anime version of the story, but known only as the Hemulan in the book. The Hemulan loves the cold, fresh air of the season, and all the activities that come with it, like skiing, snow gymnastics, and even polar bear plunging into freezing lakes. Unfortunately, he also really loves jam and begins to deplete Moomintroll's supply. Moomintroll never really takes to activities like skiing, but he begins to appreciate the beauty of the season in his own way. When his parents finally do wake up, Moomintroll realizes he is much better off for having experienced the winter rather than hibernating through it. Moomintroll begrudgingly discovers the beauty of winter with the help of his friends and his community. This theme is echoed in a story by another great Nordic author of children's books, Astrid Lindgren. Yes, it's odd, but Nordic authors are masters of both children's fantasy and also horribly disturbing crime novels. Go figure. The Swedish author Astrid Lindgren is most known for her Pippi Longstockings book series, but a great winter tale can be found in one of her later fantasy stories, Ronja the Robber's Daughter. The story follows the young daughter and protege of Mattis, the chief of a robber gang in medieval Scandinavia. The gang live alone in a castle surrounded by a mystical forest, but one night a lightning bolt splits the castle in two, and later a rival robber gang occupies the other half of the castle. While Mattis attempts to drive the rival gang out, Ronja develops a friendship with Burke, the son of the rival chief, and during a long harsh winter, she helps her friend and his family survive. Ronja's father is furious at this and disowns her at first, but ultimately Ronja and Burke convince both gangs to put their differences aside and come together. This story reinforces the importance of community during the winter months, and not only the community of one's own family, but also one's neighbors and even rivals. In fact, the Nordic concept of community can extend beyond this to include everyone. This is a message emphasized in a Norwegian film adapted from an old legend of the indigenous Sami or Lapp people of northern Scandinavia. The 1987 film Pathfinder, and I want to emphasize that it's the 1987 film, not the 2007 remake, is set 1,000 years ago during a cold winter in Finnmark. One day the young hunter Eigen returns home to find his entire family slaughtered by the warlike Chudes people from the east. Greatly outnumbered, Eigen escapes the Chudes, on one ski no less, and makes it to a nearby village. When Eigen warns the village of the oncoming invasion, the elder decides they should flee. However, Eigen and a few men stay behind to fight the Chudes. On the eve before the Chudes arrive, Eigen is visited by the village shaman or Pathfinder, Raste. Raste warns Eigen not to let his mind be clouded by vengeance, and reminds him that he is part of a greater family, a greater whole that unites all things. Eigen does what he must to defend the villagers, but Raste's message is passed to him. Pathfinder has a powerful message, but the film also showcases some great Scandinavian winter activities, like skiing, sledding, and even saunaing, all great ways to enjoy the winter with our greater family. There is one more very powerful tool that Nordic people use against winter that is missing from all these stories, and that is the Nordic sense of humor. When the world outside is cold and dark, it's best not to take it or yourself too seriously. Comedy is one of the best antidotes to the cabin fever winter can impose on us. But if you really want to laugh at the season in the Nordic style, keep in mind that their sense of humor is often darker than the season itself. The Nordic sense of humor is typically very dark, dry, sardonic, and skeptical. In fact, their humor can be so dark that Nordic comedy can sometimes be mistaken for drama in America. The Nordic people are renowned humanitarians, and yet ironically their humor often comes from a skepticism toward humanity, social interaction, and simply life in general. This is embodied by the title character of Swedish author Fredrik Backman's novel, A Man Called Uwe. After the death of his wife and his forced retirement, the old curmudgeonly Uwe is on the verge of suicide, and has absolutely no left to give. While his situation is tragic, Uwe's nasty, unfiltered interaction with his neighbors and the world in general is often hilarious. As autumn turns into winter, a new family move into Uwe's community and accidentally destroy his mailbox. Uwe is characteristically annoyed at this at first, but as his relationship with the family develops, they begin to melt his old icy heart. Life can't always be warm and sunny, but when it gets cold and dark, humor can be the woolen sweater that makes the world somewhat bearable. If you don't mind me using some heavy-handed seasonal metaphors there. As you probably gathered from my accent, I may not be the best authority on this subject. So please, let me know what your favorite movies, books, or stories set in the Nordic winter are. Or let me know how your culture approaches winter. Please like and subscribe for more videos that delve into the themes and meanings of stories in all forms, and from all over the world. Until next time, Skull!